We're sitting on 85 registrants so far, and I think this is our cue to get going. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning for our webinar titled 21st Century Lawyer. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Nili Swamncube. I am the Head of Marketing and Brand at LexisNexis. It is such a pleasure to be here this morning, and thank you to each of you for joining us. Just before we get into the mechanics of today, I do just want to make reference to some of the things that have transpired when it comes to the practice of law and technology. We all know that there's been great changes and shifts when it comes to law and technology. And as the millennials have been joining us and coming into the workspace, they obviously have much greater reliance on technology, and they're very open to the alternative way of working. Just before we start, I do want to quote some stats that show us how much legal technology has progressed within the framework of the legal industry. So 75% of law firms are spending approximately 4% of their gross billings in IT and infrastructure as well as software. In a survey that was conducted between 80 legal professionals, nearly 50% of the respondents spoke about their biggest challenge being the driving of innovation in their organization and ensuring that their organizations move from what is called business as usual. Lastly, up to 80% of tasks that we currently do within the legal industry will be automated in the future where legal tech takes over. As you guys can see from these stats, we are living in a very different environment and world to what we had become accustomed to. As human beings, it's our nature to try and ignore what we see as a fast changing world. So some of us might decide to not do anything about it and see how all of this unfolds. I'm not sure if this is a good strategy to practice, because while you don't intake or while you don't get technology into your law firms, you do run the risk of increasing your competitors' league against you. So in order to adapt, we do know that there are three key pillars that interconnect when it comes to legal tech. These are namely people, processes, and technology. So today's session is really going to be focused around how the people side of things as well as the process can be interconnected to make sure that we deliver the best form of legal tech in our organization. The focus of today's webinar is going to be how you define someone as a 21st century lawyer. We're going to talk and unpack what some of the key trends are when it comes to legal services. There's an ethical duty that we cannot ignore when it comes to technology. And so today's session is going to touch on what that is. And finally, we want to be able to empower and equip everyone that is part of the session around what are the tools and techniques that can make them successful as 21st century lawyers. I do need to pay some school fees before we start, so I'm just going to run everyone through what our housekeeping rules are. All delegates that are in attendance will be muted during the session, apart from our speakers. There will be an opportunity for everyone to ask any questions that they may have during the discussion. I do encourage everyone to use our Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your screen, for us to be able to pick these up. We may run out of time during the agenda to answer all the questions that you have, but I can assure you guys that we will ensure that an FAQ document is circulated afterwards. Please use the chat box for the general comments and not for the questions. So the chat box is just for us to have the general banter as the session goes on. Finally, the webinar will be recorded and will be made available to each and every person that is in attendance today. We're very pleased to have our esteemed guest and speaker today, Kevin van Tonder. He is the individual that is responsible for building our e-learning course, which is called the 21st Century Lawyer. The course really aims to help and guide the next generation lawyer to be able to better transform the way that they work. in a profession that has largely remained the same over this time. The course itself is built for both in-house practitioners as well as individuals that work within law firms. I'm going to take some time to introduce Kevin, and I do want to do justice to his profile and bio as well as experience. So, Kevin has over 25 years of legal experience, of which 15 of them he spent in a law firm called Schlumberger. He has worked in West Africa and the UK, as well as the Middle East and France. In his previous role as the General Legal Counsel at Schlumberger in Paris, he developed a passion for transforming the way lawyers deliver legal service to the business. He has extensive experience in legal operations, compliance, people development, and many of the challenging jurisdictions that he has had to operate in. Kevin headed up a transformation project for Schlumberger, which was nominated as a finalist in the FT Innovative Lawyers Awards in North America in 2017. He is currently in the advisory board is currently an advisory board member of the General Counsel Executive Program in the Netherlands. As you guys can see, we do really have the best in the business to come and address us today. I'm now going to hand over to Kevin for him to take us through his session for the morning. Thank you so much, Kevin. Over to you.
Thank you, Nelly. Let me just quickly share my screen. Yes. Right, let's crack on. So thank you, Nelly, for that introduction. Just to say, point out that Schlumberger wasn't a law firm. It's a large corporate multinational in the oil and gas services sector, one of the largest in the world. And as Nelly said, I did spend a lot of my time in West Africa, the UK, France, and the Middle East as well. So, do you have a nagging feeling that there's a better way to practice law and deliver legal services, but you're not sure where to start? Do you want to future-proof your in-house legal team or your law firm? Are you ready to engage and leverage the advances that are being made in legal technology? So as Nelly mentioned, I've built this e-learning course with LexisNexis to help sort of guide the next generation of legal professionals to deliver legal services in a better way and to help transform a profession that has largely remained the same for hundreds of years. It's been built from an in-house legal perspective, but it will be useful for practitioners in law firms too, as many of the same principles apply, and it will give these firms better insight into what their corporate clients will expect from them in this increasingly digitized world. I'll be covering insights and providing practical guidance on some proven principles and techniques, and I'll expand on this, of course, in the course, and that can be used to tackle the key trends that we are seeing impacting the legal profession today. There's already been some important changes to the delivery of legal services brought about by both people inside and outside of the profession who are refusing to accept the status quo. They are leveraging advances in technology and are introducing new ways of what it means to be a good lawyer by looking at trends and best practices outside of the legal profession. So in the words of General Eric Shinseki, who's a US general, he said once, if you dislike change, you will dislike irrelevance even more. And I think this is important for the profession. We need to accept that we live in a world where change is at a far higher velocity than in the past, and we need to learn to deal with this in a constructive manner. So during this webinar, I'm going to touch on a few points that I deal with in more detail in the course, as I mentioned, as to how we as lawyers can better adapt to the trends impacting the profession. So what is a 21st century lawyer? It is someone who understands the distinction between the practice of law and the delivery of legal services. They're no longer the same thing. Why people are key to transformation, how systems thinking can help you understand the interdependency between people, process, and technology within an organization and also within a law firm, how waste and over-lawyering can be reduced through sound end-to-end processes, continuous improvements, data, and outcomes thinking, how design thinking can make you a more human-centered lawyer, and also demonstrating that law technology or legal tech is a tool, not a solution on its own. So I know that some of you have probably heard of Professor Richard Susskind, and you may have read his books. You may agree with him, you may not. But he does confront us with some uncomfortable realities. So in his book, Tomorrow's Lawyers, in 2010, he said that the legal market is in a remarkable state of flux. In less than 2 decades, the way in which lawyers work will change radically. Entirely new ways of delivering legal services will emerge. New providers will firmly be established in the market, and the workings of our courts will be transformed. Unless they adapt, many traditional legal businesses will fail. On the other hand, a whole set of fresh opportunities will present themselves to entrepreneurial and creative young lawyers. So you'll see in the next slide, I will highlight exactly what does this mean. So you see this highlights the progression nicely. So the chap on the left is sort of the traditional view of a lawyer sitting at his desk, files, papers, very sort of ad hoc manual type processes. And on the right is a service called Do Not Pay. I met this guy in New York, and it's a chatbot, and he started initially with traffic fines. So he uses robotic process automation as the basis of his service. So one feature allows users to file a claim in any small claims court in the US, including all 3,000 counties in 50 states. It also includes a service that claims to help users obtain green cards and visas, eliminating the usual service fees. Other service offerings include searching for hidden class action settlements you owed, fighting credit card and overdraft fees, suing tech companies for data breaches, and collecting money from hotel and airline bookings through price protection guarantees. And of course, you can still fight your parking tickets, which is how Do Not Pay got its start originally. So let's have a look at some of the most important trends impacting the legal profession and the delivery of legal services over the coming years. So if you look at some of the key trends that will impact the profession, it has become clear that the traditional way of doing things cannot survive. 3 of these trends, and there's more, but I'll just touch on 3. There's an increasingly digitized society that we live in, and the ability to scale a product or service or business exists like never before. Changing customer expectations in how legal services are delivered, legal practice, and as I said, legal practice and the delivery of legal services no longer mean the same thing. And the legal talent and skills required to flourish in a digitized world will be different to what has made a lawyer successful in the traditional law firm or legal department. And of course, don't forget the black swans. They seem to be making an appearance more frequently. And we have to build resilience into our in-house legal teams and law firms to account for this. So the first trend I'll examine is the pervasiveness of digital technology. So this is an interesting slide. So the graphic on the left illustrates how, at this point in time, our technology or technological reality is exceeding our human adaptability and our ability for organizations to adapt, right? So, and it's happening at an exponential rate. On the right, for those who have studied a bit of innovation and disruptive innovation, what it means is these are what you call S-curves, right? And what happens with disruptive technology is, and with anything disruptive in disruptive innovation, is that there's these jumps from one S-curve to another that moves things from a first generation to a second generation to a third generation and so on. And what's happened is that technology is accelerating the ability for innovation to be more disruptive. And you'll see in the next slide what I mean. So, I mean, don't hold me to these dates 100%, right? And it's something that I sort of came up with a few years back. So kind of explaining the S curves in legal and why I think we're moving into legal 4.0. So the law regulates practically every aspect of society and business, but it's becoming increasingly complex, fragmented, and opaque. It is not easy to navigate without the help of a lawyer, often at great cost. And because it is a complex system, it means that it is a domain in which it is inconceivable that any single expert can understand the entire system. Therefore, the days of a single human cognitive machine, as Prof. Dan Katz has called lawyers in the past, processing information and generally navigating law's complexity are long gone. The widespread adoption of law technology and the increasing automation of legal services and processes will have a profound effect on the legal market and how legal services are delivered, evidenced by the trends that we mentioned earlier on, the pervasiveness of digital technology, access to technology and data means that businesses will be doing far more for themselves. Lawyers need to be strategic business partners and demonstrate value to the business beyond their current functional process stewardship. The application economy means that legal services will increasingly be delivered on platforms and in ecosystems. Isolation will mean extinction, and the global regulatory framework is becoming increasingly complex and fragmented. So this diagram kind of shows that evolution. You can see, for probably from the 4th century sometime to about 1970 or thereabouts, the law was very sort of individualized. The knowledge sat in your head, and it was very sort of paper-based. And then sort of 1970 to probably around 2005, very much electronic, connected legal knowledge. First things, World Wide Web came out, LexisNexis Ubique, electronic word processing, matter management systems, and so forth. And then probably about 2005, so 15 years ago, we moved more into this digitized space, distributed legal knowledge, where you've got technology-assisted reviews for for e-discovery. You've got emerging legal artificial intelligence, lawyers looking at process and design thinking, services like Do Not Pay, Rocket Lawyer, LegalZoom, all coming. So you can see, so from 1,500 years, nothing much changed. Then all of a sudden, there's a change within 35 years and then another change within 15 years. And I think from about 2021, probably some of it accelerated a little bit by COVID, we're going to start seeing rapid advances in machine learning, natural language processing, liberalization of new business models that you're seeing in the US, which has always been sort of the fighting against any change within the sort of traditional legal regulatory space. And I think this is where you're going to start seeing disruption. In the Law Society of England and Wales, in their law tech adoption research report of February 2019, said that the widespread adoption of legal tech and the increased automation of legal services and processes will have a profound effect on the UK legal market. So the English are not normally prone to hyperbole, which makes that statement even more significant. So resistance against the profession from outside the profession is building. There are entrepreneurs that are hyper-focused on the customer and the customer experience. If you look at Legal Geek, they have a startup map which contains, just in the UK alone, over 250 legal tech enabled startups with about 1.2 billion invested last I looked in 2019. So some may say that maybe it's a bit of a bubble, but so what? The trend and intentions of these startups are clear, and legal practitioners will no longer be able to hold back the flood using protective legislation. Because let's be clear, law societies and bar councils exist to protect the legal market for practitioners. The rules do not exist to protect consumers, no matter how we like to spin that. The cracks are already there. Alternative business structures in the UK allow ownership from outside the profession. Few states in the US have already started looking at how they can liberalize their rules. Arizona, District of Columbia, Utah, and California are leading the charge. So yes, there is hype, but no doubt much of it is driven by marketing folk of some of these law tech companies. Even some of the bigger law firms have jumped onto the bandwagon. I like to call it innovation by press release. But the reality is the future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed. Much of the hype can be explained if you study sort of the Gartner hype cycle. But eventually, as second and third generation products become available, the advancement of the technology ultimately leads to an increase in productivity, and depending on the technology, could fundamentally change the way people work. So if you're sitting there thinking that all this talk about digital pervasiveness and law tech is for the younger crowd in your legal team or in your law firm, and that you can sort of safely ignore this, because up to now you've kind of managed quite fine with email only, I think you are wrong. But I mean, I think it's also difficult to, as Professor Susskind says, to tell a room full of millionaires, I'm talking about the law firm partners, that their business model is wrong, right? But I think what we're seeing is going to be reflective of that. So you have an ethical duty to be technology competent. Although the following quote was in respect of a particular state in the US, I'll submit that it is true globally. A lawyer's fundamental duty has always been to provide a competent representation to their customer. In the past, lawyers thought of competence as focused solely on the substantive knowledge of a certain area of law, combined with the experience and ability to adequately represent a customer in a specific engagement. The evolution of technology does not change the duty to maintain competence. It merely means that maintaining technological competence is part of meeting that duty. In short, lawyers can no longer be proudly unaware of technology and still claim to ethically serve their customers' needs. So what does this all mean? Can you just sit back and say, well, I run a good practice that is profitable and I do just fine without all this tech? I would say, no, you cannot, because you have to consider your customer. Even in our situation, there are, where lawyers are cost centers, you have this duty. Yes, the business does not always know why having some other new tech is critical for better compliance, for example, and you struggle to get the budget to do anything substantial, but it's your duty to educate the business and to use what you have at your disposal. So for example, if the business is using Microsoft 365 and it has fantastic capabilities, you as a lawyer should figure out how to maximize that software to make you more efficient and effective. If you can show the benefit by cobbling together solutions from tech that was not necessarily designed for lawyers, you start to open the door for building the business case for dedicated legal technology. So how do you meet this ethical duty? I would say, people talk about coding. I say forget about coding, although it is useful to understand the basics. And the reason is basically, what are you going to do? Your job is to be a lawyer or to be a coder. If you try and do both, I suspect that you're going to fall short on both sides. Yes, there is some interesting tech out there like Brighter, which allows you to code, which is actually as a low or no code technology. So if you can draw a process map, you can use Brighter. That's the kind of tech which I think lawyers should become really comfortable with. Invest in regular good quality technology training, improve digital and data literacy, encourage collaborative multidisciplinary teams, understand various forms of thinking beyond just your deductive and inductive reasoning, which lawyers are very good at. So think of things like design thinking, systems thinking. What does that mean? And senior lawyers in law firms and legal departments need to show leadership around this. Okay, the next trend I'm going to look at from a corporate perspective is this concept of an aligned strategic support. And this is how commercial lawyers and in-house counsel need to adapt to the changing expectations of how legal services are delivered to the business. So I'll use the corporate legal department as an example. So in most corporates, the legal department is just another function. There's no ivory tower, nor should there be one. The legal team has to deliver just like the procurement and sourcing team, sales and operations. The business leaders expect legal services in their business to be delivered in an agile manner with scale, speed, and it should be risk adjusted according to the risk profile of the business. And of course, this risk adjusted decision making must be practically immediately available. In other words, built into existing business end-to-end processes. There's no time to create a bespoke solution every time a legal issue pops up. So what does that mean practically? So let's look at the sales and sourcing processes. Both involve contracts. It makes absolutely no sense for legal to have a separate process. It is legal's role to figure out the framework and risk profile for contracting within the organization, preferably supported by technology so that the business can make decisions within that predetermined framework. Only exceptions should be routed to the legal team, and even then, the process for managing those exceptions should be scalable, fast, and transparent. So in a globalized economy, lawyers don't have the luxury to sit on a contract for 3 weeks while they work their way through all the risks, real and hypothetical. The lawyer serving that business should know it so well that the risk associated with a particular contract should be completely evident to that reviewing lawyer. And by the way, this applies equally to the law firms that support that business. So if you look here, the headlines of these two articles will highlight how businesses run as corporations and not law firms are providing scalable solutions to meet the demands of corporate customers. So for a consumer seeking advice on a divorce, the expectations will be completely different. But the point is that to meet expectations and to deliver an outstanding customer experience, the lawyers need to learn to pay close attention to what their customers want and need, and then deliver on this. You can only do this, I suppose, if you are customer-centered, right? So just a final point on scalability. So Duncan Weston is a managing partner of CMS, and when CMS entered the South African legal market, he was quoted as saying that there's a dilemma globally about how to globalize corporate law. Customers are demanding expertise as their worlds become increasingly global. For me, it's about using technology to enable very high quality law firms to transact together on a cloud-based platform. I call it a global local approach, where a top quality law firm can be cloud-based rather than geographically based. Then top lawyers in various jurisdictions can work together. We are building this. In this way, customers and law firms can transact together in one place no matter where they are in the world. They will just be using top lawyers all over the world, and the geographic aspect will disappear. Those firms in the middle and those who are not able to globalize properly will totally disappear. Bigger locally focused firms will get hammered because they fall in the middle between the real niche firms and the big international ones. This process might take time, but you've already seen a number of top quality law firms disappear. So what he's saying is that the middle is disappearing. You see it in society in a number of things, whether it's in politics, the two extremes, the left and the right, but the middle is kind of disappearing. And the same with business. It's either something that's extremely niche or extremely customer focused, or it's something that's extremely scalable and globalized. And so I think I've seen this before in a book on law firm business model. They call it the hollow middle. It's where you try and be the general law firm, trying to do a bit of everything, supporting everyone, and it's just not going to work in the new globalized economy and digitized world that we live in. So if you want to be resilient, I suppose what I can say is be careful of thinking the same way as you've always done. If your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So how do we address these challenges posed by these trends? So I think by using hybrid thinking, for one, And what is that? It's a toolbox of various methods such as deductive, inductive, abductive systems thinking, design, integrative, visual. It's a whole lot, right? It's not just the typical way you learn to think at a law school. Lawyers see themselves as independent, but this thinking and understanding of their role obscures the fact that their corporate clients are highly interdependent on other players in the systems in which they operate. There's a gap between the unemotional reason and logic of the independent, rational thinking lawyer and the interdependence of business enterprises connected by relationships and purpose. Our training teaches us to give or to use logical arguments that apply deductive reasoning, so it's rule-based, analogical, and inductive reasoning to arrive at a conclusion. There's, of course, nothing wrong with this, but it is unlikely on its own to assist us with the challenges posed by these trends. So, and if you've started your change journey, be aware that, and many GCs that I speak to kind of forget about this, right? It's not something that's foremost in their mind, and it should be, is that change management is hard, and many change efforts fail because it is done as an afterthought. In fact, you have to begin right at the start of your any transformation journey with thinking about change and how you're going to manage that during this process. You have to stay the course, and you have to be aware of the issues listed on the slide that can derail your project. And you'll see that most of these issues that I'm referencing here are either people related, process related, or technology related. So thank you. That's me. I'll hand over back to the LexisNexis team.
Kevin, thank you very much for that insightful and informative presentation. I really hope that our attendees have found some value in the critical information that you were sharing with us. I am now going to offer our attendees an opportunity to ask you a couple of questions. I've already got questions that I've been picking up as you were conversing and having the conversation with us. I do just want to remind everyone that in order for your questions to be posed to Kevin, we do need them to be passed on to the Q&A tab. So let's just get straight into it, Kevin. There is a question that came from Moni Sondlovu. And his question is, he'd like you to really just paint a picture for us. How can a legal practitioner prepare or enable themselves to be a 21st century lawyer? He makes reference to the fact that a law degree alone only equips one with the legal technical skills, which has clearly become insufficient. And he really just wants to know, how does one become a 21st century lawyer outside of obviously taking your e-learning course that is on offer today?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think you're right. The law faculties don't really equip lawyers for this. Some are starting to change. I mean, I'm seeing in the US that there are a few courses offered around this that lawyers can take, while they're studying law, to help prepare them for the future. And I think in South Africa, there's some discussions around this as well. I mean, I see UCT's got sort of a law tech initiative as well, and a policy unit that they're developing around that. So those are good signs. But I still think some law faculties think that it's not their job to train lawyers, and it's a law firm's role to do this. But I also think, in this sense, many corporates, maybe it's different in South Africa, but from my experience overseas, many corporates are actually leading the change around this and are almost better equipped and better placed than law firms in this regard. But I mean, I did it personally. I mean, I was lucky to be in a corporate that was quite, the big focus on technology and new ways of working, and I just assimilated some of this stuff and sort of just learned, sitting in management meetings and listening to to other managers talk about certain things and using certain processes, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. What's a Kaizen event? How can I use Kaizen to make my team more efficient, or how can I use that to rework some of our processes? Things like that. And it's kind of reading broader than just your normal legal stuff. Is going out and obviously there's some good kind of books dealing with delivery of legal services, legal tech, process thinking for lawyers, Lean Six Sigma, books on knowledge management, and so on. But also, I think, read wider. General management books. There's a lot that we can learn from other functions within the business and tools that we can use as lawyers, and bring that into our profession to make us more proficient. And that's when in this course, I look at things like, sort of the process side of things, process mapping, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, design thinking. Then I move on to the technology side of things, and just playing with different tech out there and becoming more sort of conversant with it. So until such time as they become these more formalized, dedicated learning opportunities within law schools and so on, a lot of this stuff is I think people are going to have to kind of improvise a little bit.
Thank you so much for that response, Kevin. And I think just some of the highlighted points that you've mentioned is really, it's around the proactiveness from each individual, instead of almost waiting for the faculty and the way that everything is structured to take this change. There is a second question that I have for you, and this is a question that's come through from Brendan. He states that you've mentioned that there's no reason for learning coding, but he's very keen to understand if you believe that there is merit in learning to break into smart contracts. Blockchain is obviously making a big breakout, and he just wants to hear what your thoughts are when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. When I said don't need to code, is if your day job is to be a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, tax lawyer, giving advice around that. Yeah, learning to code is not necessarily your most important thing. But of course, with the advent of legal technology, with things called legal job titles called legal engineers, guys who are in the alternative legal service provider market, so those are working for firms like myself, Cognia, Integrion, Elevate, these businesses where a lot of the work is very process driven, looking at automation, and using technology to make lawyers basically deal with the high volume, lower risk contracts at scale and at speed and with efficiency and extracting data. There, I think then if that's where your focus is going to be, or if you're going to work in a law tech company, then of course learn to code. It makes absolute sense then.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I do have another question, and this is specifically from Nomfundo Shope. So I am paraphrasing some of the questions that are coming through. So just so our attendees do know that I'm not reading line by line. So Nomfundo speaks about the fact that, she would really like to see or have you share some examples of how we can include tech in our in practice. So she speaks about the fact that we obviously have LexisNexis, which is more readily accessible and available on smartphones. But what are the other tools that are out there in the market besides just the research database, the cloud, as well as the virtual meetings that we've all become so accustomed to?
Okay, so I'm not going to speak from a law firm perspective, because most of my time is obviously been in a corporate, but some of the key things in a corporate that we use is what you call enterprise legal management. So that's a matter management system for lawyers. So that's everything that you deal with as a whether it's a small project, a task, I think gets captured as a matter. And that links into e-billing for law firms, for litigation, and for advisory work and so forth. Then there's the contract lifecycle management technology, the other sort of core tech that they use is to move contracting from cradle to grave within corporates. So there you got tools like Onnit, Aptus, Icertis, and so on. So they do contract lifecycle management at scale in large corporates. There's document automation side of things, so being able to help the business with self-service so that you can set things up that you like a basic Q&A or drop-down menus from the business, and they can build their own non-disclosure agreements from that, and only if there's pushback from the counterparty does it come to the legal team. There's contract review technology out now, like artificial intelligence, so that you can build your risk profile into this, and for certain type of contracts, as they especially if you do a lot of a certain type of contract within a business, the artificial intelligence can highlight those risks that you have indicated in the in sort of training it that it should be looking for. So it speeds up your review time by up to 40-50%, and it saves a lot of time. So those are the kind of technologies already. There's a low code process workflow type tech called, one that I use is called Brighter. So you can, if you can draw a process map, you can basically code the tool, and you can push legal tasks through a particular process in an automated fashion. And then things that we're starting to see, like robotic process automation, is also starting for very repeatable legal tasks. So there's a hell of a lot of tech out there. Some of it at different stages of maturity, but I suppose the most mature for me would be the e-discovery stuff, contract lifecycle management, and matter management.
Thanks so much for that, Kevin. I think just based on the points that you raise, it may be worthwhile for us as part of the post mailer to our attendees to just maybe list those out so that they know what is already out there. So we'll definitely facilitate that on our side. I do have another question that is coming from Graham. And Graham really would like you to speak a bit more about how you feel of how you see the role of lawyers and the advice they give in the context of the disruption that is the changing understanding around financial value, and how this is connected to the social and environmental value.
Yeah, so I mean, I think lawyers, what legal tech does, and automation is, it takes away a lot of the sort of mundane routine tasks that lawyers do, and that gives them the opportunity. So it frees up capacity, right? So we say AI is not going to replace lawyers, but it's going to allow them to work in different ways, which means that they can be a lot more strategic. They can start showing and just demonstrating far more value to the business, and that can be demonstrated in metrics that are of financial nature. There's other ways of doing it as well, but generally, if you can do that in a way that the business understands, which is usually numbers, that is good. But I also think lawyers are key, especially in-house lawyers, to our current challenges that we're facing around climate change and the climate emergency. And there's actually a group, you can go look them up, called Lawyers for Net Zero. And they are a group, it's a voluntary sort of association, and there's already some high profile GCs that have signed up for it, and they're using their roles, and they see their roles as in-house lawyers within corporates to drive the conversation around achieving a net zero, carbon emission reductions and so forth, and moving to a more sustainable, purposeful business. So go look it up. I speak quite regularly to Adam Woodall. He's the guy that heads that up, and I think it's a great initiative to get involved in. And that sort of all ties into the whole ESG component, which I think lawyers are going to be critical, and lawyers should actually be owning ESG within the business, mainly because of the regulatory nature of it, but also the horizon scanning that comes along with that, right? Being able to understand that things that are considered soft law now and the principles that are sitting out there in OECD, United Nations, and so forth, that are not necessarily cast in stone in hard law and local legislation. Those are kind of trends that you can see and be able to advise the business that this is coming to us in the next 3, 4, 5 years, and we as a business need to prepare for that, and not wait for it to be like pop year, where at the last minute everyone scrambles to become compliant, right?
Cool. Thank you so much. We do have a couple more questions, but I'm just going to try and maybe take the last two because we are running out of time. So the first question is really around how you foresee the landscape of law firms and legal spaces changing in light of what we've just spoken about. So Nosipo speaks about the fact that currently it's quite hierarchical, and she believes that, you know, with this shift and the change, we are going to see more of the technocrats taking over and skewing how those spaces are put together. Do you have some thoughts of that? Is that something that you believe is going to happen?
I don't want to see it in a negative way, so because when you say technocrat, it sounds like it sounds negative. But I think what you're going to see, and I think for law firms and in-house legal teams who support businesses to really thrive and add value, is that those teams have to become a lot more diverse in terms of, and multidisciplinary, right? So the legal tech guy he's not just the IT guy who kind of come and helps me fix my laptop. He's an integral part of my team in terms of providing a solution to the client. Teams need to be more diverse, and that I mean, you know, race, gender, all that. At Schlumberger, I managed a team with 48 different nationalities in 40 different countries. And I saw firsthand the value of having diverse teams, because when you have a team that everyone is exactly the same, they have the same background, they have the same education, they have the same thinking, you get to that where I said earlier on, if your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So that thinking becomes like a hammer. It's only one way of seeing things, and you solve your problems in the same way every single time. But start changing, adding diversity to the team, where people come from different backgrounds, different ways of experiencing things, different approach to solving problems, and all of a sudden you find you become far more creative in solving problems. So I think teams must become more diverse, more multidisciplinary, and this sort of hierarchy of the lawyers being the fee earners, or and being seen as the top dogs in a law firm or in a corporate team needs to change, and a lot more sort of valuing the contribution of other, and this is the word that we should all remove from our vocabulary, non-lawyers. Because today I'm a non-astronaut, although I'm a lawyer. We don't call people by what they're not, right? So if we do anything today, get rid of that word in your vocabulary, a non-lawyer, because accountants don't call themselves that, and accountants don't also, you know, as a lawyer myself, I'm actually a non-astronaut. I'm a non-accountant. It's a stupid use of the word and things. So everyone, I think, has got value, and we should recognize the value that these different contributions make to solving our clients' problems.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. I am going to close our Q&A. There is one question that we would really appreciate you responding to on the FAQ document that will circulate around. It does talk to a conversation that I think we have also had amongst ourselves, where we talk about this replacement of a lawyer into the future. But I think we don't want to get into that quite just yet. And it will be a question that is responded to as part of that FAQ doc that I mentioned earlier in the session. Ladies and gentlemen, I do just want to draw your attention to a survey or poll that is currently on the screen. Please, can you take time to respond to this? It won't take you even a minute, but it will be extremely helpful for us as LexisNexis to be able to continue to kind of give you that useful and relevant content. And as you guys are going through that poll, I do just want to make reference to the fact that a lot of what Kevin covered today is covered on an e-learning course that he has authored, which is called the 21st Century Lawyer. It's a great privilege for us to offer all the people that are in attendance today with a 10% discount to this course. So do look out for the email that will have a discount code for you to be able to use on our e-store. We have come to the end of our proceedings for today. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for being in attendance. A big thank you to Kevin for spending this time with us and really sharing his insights and his expertise with us. We hope that everyone has found the session to be quite useful. And we're looking forward to hosting you guys in future webinars. I think right now on your screen, you will see a list of what's coming up from a LexisNexis perspective, and we are always open to getting other recommendations and suggestions from you. So if you think there's a topic that should be explored, please feel free to send an email to our webinars at lexisnexis.co.za email address. And with that, I think we do still have 4 minutes. So Kevin, please do respond to this question, because I think I'd be doing a disjustice to everyone if I didn't afford you the opportunity when we still have the time. So it's a question from Precious, and she says, how do you think the legal profession is under threat in light of all the new technology that is available, i.e. LexisNexis systems that can create templates and contracts, etc.? So are we looking at a legal industry that will no longer exist in the future?
No, I don't think so. I think we're looking at a legal industry that will work in a different way, and it's just how we adapt to that change. I mean, I think it was, you know, it's your ability to adapt to change, which is the most important thing here, because I mean, the one constant that we can be sure of is change, right? So I don't think lawyers are going to be out of work. I just think that a lot of the tech that is coming out, that is available, is going to take a lot of the drudgery away from legal work, which is a good thing. So lawyers can actually use their brains a little bit more strategically, you know, as they were expecting to do in law school. I think where it might impact is some of the work that lawyers were sort of this drudgery that they use for training purposes at law firms when you did your articles and so on. That might be taken by tech and or by alternative legal service providers. So, you know, that sort of exposure might be limited, but you'll have to find other ways of training, and you'll find that a lot of lawyers who don't get articles immediately with the law firm they're looking for, they go work for an alternative legal service provider, they work with process, they work with technology, and they end up getting training in a whole bunch of other stuff that becomes extremely useful for them later on in practice or in an in-house team. So I don't think technology is going to replace lawyers at all. I just think it's going to allow them to work in different ways, and lawyers should think about how they can creatively adapt their services and the way that they work to service clients using that technology to make them a lot more effective and efficient.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And on that positive note, ladies and gentlemen, our session has come to an end. Thank you so much once again for joining us. And we hope to see you in the next LexisNexis webinar. Thank you so much, Kevin, as well.
Thank you.